Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a situation that's unfolding right now, and it is a textbook example of how a localized crisis can literally send shockwaves across the entire globe. We're going to break down the cascading effects of the recent Red Sea missile strikes on the global economy. If you've been noticing shifts in energy markets, or maybe you're just wondering why supply chain anxieties are suddenly spiking again, well, the answers are anchored in a very narrow, incredibly dangerous stretch of water. We're taking the hard data, the breaking reports, and the geopolitical statements to understand exactly what's happening and, more importantly, why it matters to you.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, escalation in the Red Sea. Number 2, the geopolitical standoff. 3, the Gate of Tears. And finally, 4, global economic shockwaves.
Starting with Section 1, Escalation in the Red Sea.
4. That is the number of people now confirmed dead, according to the Transportation Ministry of Yemen's internationally recognized government. And what makes this absolutely crucial to understand is that these mark the very first reported fatalities of this specific maritime conflict stemming from a Houthi strike on commercial shipping since this whole escalation began. So we're no longer just talking about damaged steel or delayed cargo containers. There is now a very real, incredibly tragic human cost.
To break that down, the human toll includes 3 Pakistani nationals and 1 Indonesian national who were tragically killed. Tactically speaking, Iran-backed Houthi rebels fired 3 ballistic missiles that directly hit a civilian commercial vessel. But, perhaps the most alarming detail to come out of the source reports is this last point. A 4th missile was fired that specifically targeted the Yemeni rescue teams who were actively out there attempting to reach the stricken vessel, ultimately wounding a Yemeni rescuer. I mean, that drastically changes the risk assessment for literally any ship operating in the area. To truly grasp the momentum of this crisis, we've got to look at the timeline, right? Because this didn't just happen in a vacuum. Things have deteriorated fast. On July 20th, Houthi forces publicly announced their intent to impose a naval blockade on Saudi Arabia's Red Sea shipping. Fast forward to August 11th, and we saw this put into action when a small cargo vessel, verified as the Egyptian-owned Tahama, was attacked near Morad, Yemen. And then the escalation really culminated this past Tuesday with the fatal missile strikes on the commercial ship and the incoming rescue teams we were just talking about. You can see the direct, undeniable line from stated intent to deadly reality. Which brings us to Section 2, the geopolitical standoff. And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the diplomatic gridlock. You've essentially got 2 totally immovable positions. On one side, the Yemeni Houthi movement states that these maritime operations are strict retaliation. They claim they're responding to a Saudi military siege and continuing severe restrictions imposed on Yemen. On the flip side, Saudi Arabia and its allies flat out reject that accusation. Their stance is that the Houthis are simply threatening innocent civilians, destabilizing international commerce, and actively violating the freedom of navigation. These intensely conflicting motives are exactly what's keeping this vital waterway as an active battleground. In the diplomatic fallout, it's expanding rapidly. Following the deaths of the 3 Pakistani sailors, Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister Ishaq Dar unequivocally condemned the strike. He emphasized that, and I quote, "An attack on a civilian vessel that endangers innocent lives constitutes a violation of international law and poses a serious threat to freedom of navigation." Islamabad is now actively in contact with both Saudi authorities and the Yemeni government. It just goes to show how a localized missile strike instantly transforms into a top-tier international diplomatic incident. Moving right along to Section 3, the Gate of Tears. So, geographically, where is this all going down? The attacks are happening in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which literally translates to the Gate of Tears. It's a very narrow, mandatory maritime choke point that connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden and the wider Indian Ocean. Crucially, if you're a massive cargo ship traveling between Europe and Asia and you want to use the Suez Canal, you absolutely have to pass through this narrow waterway. There's no secret shortcut. That means every single attack here extends a threat way beyond just the specific vessel involved. It threatens the very artery of global trade. So what happens when commercial shipping giants look at the Gate of Tears and decide it's simply too dangerous? Well, they trigger a massive domino effect. Step 1. Ships are forced to abandon the Suez Canal entirely and divert their route all the way around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. Step 2. This massive, thousands of miles detour heavily adds to travel time and absolutely skyrockets fuel costs. And Step 3. Even with the detour, the heightened risk environment means shipping companies have to absorb surging maritime insurance premiums. This isn't just a minor logistical headache. It's a sudden, massive tax on global trade that ultimately gets passed right down to consumers, meaning you and me. And that leads us to our final section, global economic shockwaves. The International Energy Agency has issued a stark warning in their latest monthly oil market report. Because an agreement to ensure unhindered transit through the Bab el-Mandab Strait remains totally out of reach right now, they're forecasting a huge global oil supply deficit. To put that into perspective, global oil supply is expected to fall by roughly 4.3 million barrels per day this year. That represents about 4% of total global output. Now, 4% might sound small in everyday life, but in the tightly balanced world of global energy, a 4% sudden drop is a tectonic shift that leaves oil markets facing an incredibly steep supply deficit. Now, you might be wondering, is anyone trying to fix this? Well, there are diplomatic efforts underway to relieve some of the pressure in nearby choke points. Qatar's foreign minister actually noted that Oman and Iran have reached an advanced stage of negotiations to reopen shipping routes in the Strait of Hormuz. But of course, geopolitical hurdles are massive. Iranian officials want a deal centered strictly on shipping routes, but according to reports, the U.S. is demanding the entire strait be open for any deal to move forward. On top of that, things are complicated by both Iran and the U.S. demanding compensation before any agreement gets finalized. So while talks are happening, actual relief for the anxious global markets remains completely stalled. Now, what's really interesting here is how these unresolved tensions immediately translate into long-term financial pain. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, expects significant restrictions to continue, and because of that, they've aggressively heightened their oil price forecasts all the way out to 2026. The average Brent crude price forecast jumped from $81.91 up to $86.81 per barrel. West Texas Intermediate, or WTI, was raised from $76.26 to almost $81 a barrel. The market is officially pricing in the long-term reality of these geopolitical standoffs. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We've traced the whole timeline today, from localized missile strikes and tragic human costs to the unavoidable geographic bottlenecks, all the way down to the surging cost of global oil. So I want to leave you with this question to ponder. If the world's most vital maritime choke points, places like the Gate of Tears, remain expanding battlefields, how will the global supply chain survive the rising cost of international trade? It is a giant, complex puzzle, and the outcome is going to affect every single one of us. Thank you so much for joining me to break this all down today, and as always, keep asking the big questions.